My name is Ellen Newberry, and I was 31 years old when I learned how quiet a breakup can be when you finally stop fighting it. The text came the night before our vacation. No warning, no build-up, no argument beforehand that might have softened the blow. I've been thinking a lot. I need a break from us. Some space. Please don't contact me for a while. I'll reach out when I'm ready. I was sitting on the edge of my bed. Suitcase open, half my clothes folded neatly. The other half still scattered across the room like evidence of a life I thought was stable. We had been planning this trip for over 6 months, 7 days at an all-inclusive resort, ocean views, spa reservations, sunset dinners. I'd saved just over $4,000 to cover both flights and the resort package. I'd requested time off months in advance. I'd packed his favorite linen shirts into garment sleeves so they wouldn't wrinkle. I read the message 3 times, slowly, carefully, as if maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something kinder. They didn't. I didn't cry. I didn't type a paragraph asking what I did wrong. I didn't call him. I didn't beg. I just stared at the wall for 10 full minutes, listening to the hum of my ceiling fan, feeling something in me go very still. Then I typed back one word. Okay. That was it. After that, I got to work. The airline call came first. I explained that I needed to cancel one passenger on the reservation. The agent was polite, professional, sympathetic. There were fees, of course there were, but I recovered about 60% of his ticket as credit. Not ideal, not devastating either. Next, the resort. The booking was under my name. He was listed as my guest. I told them my travel companion had canceled and that I'd be arriving alone. There was a pause on the line, then a soft, almost apologetic tone. They adjusted the reservation to single occupancy. Same room, same dates, just me. Finally, I called my friend who was supposed to check on my apartment while we were gone. I told her the plan hadn't changed. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. I finished packing, zipped the suitcase, set my alarm, and went to bed. Sleep came surprisingly easily. The next morning, I arrived at the airport early, checked in, passed through security, grabbed a coffee, and found my gate. I was scrolling mindlessly through my phone when I saw him. My boyfriend at that point, walking through the terminal with the bright blue suitcase I'd bought him for his birthday last year. He was wearing the white button-down he'd ordered specifically for this trip, the one he said made him feel confident. He looked relaxed, happy. Then he saw me. His smile widened. He waved. He practically jogged toward me, arms already opening for a hug. "Surprise," he said brightly. "I bet you thought I was serious." I didn't stand up. I didn't smile. I just looked at him. His arms dropped slowly. What he asked, confusion creeping into his voice. "Babe, why don't you look happy?" "You texted me yesterday," I said evenly. "You said you needed a break. You told me not to contact you." He laughed, a short, nervous sound. "That was a test. I wanted to see if you'd fight for me. But then I realized I was being stupid, so I decided to surprise you instead." He was still smiling like this was a story we'd laugh about later. "Aren't you happy to see me?" "Not particularly." The color drained from his face. "What?" "You said you wanted space," I continued. "So I gave it to you. I canceled your ticket last night. Changed the resort reservation. I'm going alone." His phone was already in his hand, fingers tapping frantically at the airline app. I watched his expression collapse in real time. It says canceled," he whispered. "This has to be a mistake." "It's not." "You can't do this to me," he said, voice rising. "I took time off work. I packed." I stood up, slung my carry-on over my shoulder, and stepped around him as boarding was announced. "You wanted a break," I said calmly. "Enjoy it." Behind me, his voice cracked into something loud and desperate. People started staring. I didn't turn around. When the gate agent scanned my boarding pass, she glanced up at me. "Rough morning." "It's getting better," I said. She smiled softly and waved me through. As I walked down the jetway, the noise of the terminal faded away. The aircraft hummed. The air felt still. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. I found my window seat, extra legroom, because if I was flying solo, I was doing it right and buckled in. When the plane door closed, I exhaled. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment everything changed. I didn't turn my phone on until the plane had already leveled out the seatbelt sign, chiming off with a soft, indifferent ding. When I finally did, it vibrated so violently in my hand that I almost dropped it. Missed calls, messages, voicemails stacking on top of one another like accusations. His name over and over again, broken up by numbers I didn't recognize yet, but would soon come to understand belonged to his family. I stared at the screen for a moment, felt the familiar pull to engage, to explain, to soothe, to fix, and then I powered the phone off again. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was peaceful. As clouds passed beneath the window, my mind did what it always did. When things slowed down, it replayed the past. Not the highlight reel, but the patterns. The moments I'd brushed aside because they were easier to excuse than confront. The first test had come early in our relationship, back when I still believed love was something you proved by reacting correctly. He'd stormed out of a minor argument over nothing what to eat for dinner, I think, and waited in his car for almost an hour to see if I'd chase him. When I didn't, he came back furious, accusing me of not caring enough. I apologized then. I always did back then. There were others. Times he'd mention an ex-girlfriend casually watching my face for a reaction. Days he'd go cold and distant, answering texts with one-word replies, waiting to see how long it took before I asked what was wrong. I learned the rules without ever being told them. Panic meant love. Jealousy meant passion. Discomfort meant commitment. Calm, on the other hand, was suspicious. Calm meant I didn't care. Every invisible test I failed became proof that something was wrong with me. About 8 months in, he told me he was thinking about moving back to his hometown. Not because he wanted to, but because he wanted to see what I'd say. I remember responding thoughtfully, telling him it was a big decision and that I'd support whatever made him happy. He cried that night, not because he was sad about leaving, but because I hadn't begged him to stay. We spent hours circling the same argument, him insisting he just wanted reassurance, me apologizing for not performing love loudly enough. By the time the plane touched down, my chest felt tight, but not from heartbreak, from recognition. The vacation wasn't the first test, it was just the biggest one yet. The resort was beautiful in that unreal, postcard-perfect way. White stone floors, open-air hallways, staff smiling like they'd been trained to absorb emotional fallout without flinching. When I checked in alone, the receptionist hesitated, then gently asked if I was expecting anyone else. I shook my head. Just me. Something softened in her expression. A few minutes later, she told me they'd upgraded my room due to availability. Ocean view, full balcony. Sometimes the universe doesn't whisper, it compensates. The first night I left my phone off. I walked along the beach barefoot, let the waves numb my ankles, ate dinner alone without apologizing to anyone for it. I went to bed early, exhausted in a way that felt earned. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight poured through the curtains like an invitation. On the second day, reality crept back in. I turned my phone on while sitting by the pool drink, sweating onto the table beside me. The messages flooded in immediately. Anger, apologies, accusations, declarations of love. His mother's name appeared more than once. His sister too. I didn't open most of them. I didn't need to. I'd lived this cycle enough times to know how it went. What I didn't expect was the message that arrived a few hours later from a name I barely recognized, someone I'd met once or twice at his office parties. A coworker. The tone was hesitant, almost guilty. I don't know if I should be telling you this. It began, but I think you deserve to know. He was telling people at work that he was going on this trip with someone else. An ex-girlfriend he met again at a conference last month. He said you paid for everything and he was just swapping things around. Then I guess she backed out last minute. Now he's telling everyone you abandoned him. I read it once, then again and again. The pool noise faded. The laughter around me blurred into something distant and hollow. This wasn't a test. This wasn't about seeing if I'd fight for him. The break text wasn't emotional manipulation, it was logistics. He'd been clearing space for someone else. When that plan collapsed, he'd tried to slide back into the version of the story where I was still useful. I saved the message, took a slow sip of my drink, felt something final settle into place. For the first time in 2.5 years, there was no confusion left, only clarity. And clarity, I was learning, was far more powerful than anger. I didn't respond to the coworker right away. I just sat there by the pool, the sun warm on my shoulders, the weight of 2.5 years pressing down on me all at once. The thing about the truth is that it doesn't always arrive with drama. Sometimes it shows up quietly, lines up every memory you've been trying not to connect, and then steps back to let you see the full picture on your own. I thought about all the times he'd accused me of being emotionally distant, all the arguments where I'd ended up apologizing for not reacting strongly enough, not being jealous enough, not being dramatic enough to satisfy whatever invisible metric he was using that week. I thought about how often I'd tried to adjust myself, my tone, my reactions, my instincts, just to keep the peace. And now here it was, spelled out plainly by someone who had no reason to lie to me. The tests, the tension, the break. None of it was about emotional reassurance. It was about convenience. I finally replied to the coworker with a simple thank you. No follow-up questions. No fishing for more details. I didn't need them. The damage was already complete. When I turned my phone back on later that night, the messages from my ex had multiplied. They swung wildly between rage and regret, often within the same hour. He accused me of humiliating him, then begged me to call, then blamed me for forcing him into looking like the bad guy. His mother left voicemails I didn't listen to. His sister sent long texts about loyalty and how I'd embarrassed their family publicly. Apparently, after I walked away at the gate, he'd had a full meltdown, crying, yelling at airline staff, insisting there'd been a mistake. Security had eventually escorted him out of the terminal. Not arrested, just removed. His sister had driven 2 hours to pick him up. The story they told everyone was that I'd abandoned him without warning. I didn't correct them. People who lie confidently assume you'll scramble to defend yourself. I didn't. I stayed by the pool, ordered another drink, and let the truth sit where it belonged inside me. The next morning, I woke up to a message that surprised me. His best friend. One of the few people in his life I'd always gotten along with. The tone was careful, measured. I've heard his side, it read, but I also know his patterns. Whatever happened, I hope you're okay. Don't feel pressured to respond. I stared at that message for a long time. It felt like a lifeline, not because I needed validation, but because it reminded me that not everyone buys the loudest version of a story. Then came the confirmation I didn't realize I was still bracing for. Another message from the coworker. Update it began. The conference guy told him it was never that serious. He misread the situation. HR had to talk to him today because he's been emotional at work. Just thought you should know. I laughed then, out loud. A short, incredulous sound that startled the couple sitting a few chairs away from me. The man he'd been planning to replace me with hadn't even wanted him. He'd torched a 2.5-year relationship for a fantasy that didn't exist. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. That night I blocked his number, then his mother's, then his sister's. I didn't make a speech. I didn't announce my departure. I just closed the door quietly and ordered room service. The sunset from my balcony bled orange and pink across the ocean, and for the first time since the trip began, I cried, not from loss, but from relief. 2.5 years of chasing, fixing, proving, apologizing. 2.5 years of emotional labor mistaken for love. And now finally there was nothing left to misunderstand. The bartender by the pool asked if I was traveling alone. I gave him the short version. He shook his head, slid me a drink on the house, and said, "Sounds like you dodged something." I raised my glass to the ocean. I hadn't just dodged it. I'd walked away from it. I finished the vacation the way I started it, alone, unbothered, and slowly learning what it felt like to exist without bracing for someone else's emotional weather. I swam. I read. I let myself enjoy long stretches of quiet without reaching for my phone. By the time I packed to come home, the anger had cooled into something steadier. Resolve. That illusion of calm didn't survive my return. On the 5th day of my trip, my friend the one checking on my apartment texted me, "Hey, your ex is outside your door. He's been there for almost an hour, crying. What do you want me to do?" My stomach tightened, but not in the way it used to. Not panic, annoyance. I told her not to engage with him directly and to call the building manager if he didn't leave. He wasn't on the lease. He'd never lived there. He didn't have the right to turn my hallway into a stage. According to her, a neighbor eventually complained about the noise. He left after nearly 2 hours of knocking, crying, and pacing like a performance meant for an audience that refused to show up. When I landed back home, there was a letter taped neatly to my door. 4 pages, handwritten. The highlights jumped out immediately. I made the biggest mistake of my life. The other woman meant nothing. You ruined our vacation over a misunderstanding. My therapist says you have avoidant attachment. I read it once, folded it carefully, put it in a drawer I knew I'd eventually empty. What followed was a week of escalation disguised as concern. His mother finally left a voicemail accusing me of financial abuse for canceling the ticket I'd paid for. She threatened lawyers if I didn't reimburse her son for his half of the vacation money he'd never contributed. I laughed when I heard it. Actually laughed. There's something almost impressive about that level of audacity. His sister tried a different tactic. She tracked down my older brother's contact information and called him to express concern about my mental state. My brother listened patiently, then told her I seemed perfectly relaxed in the vacation photos I'd sent, and hung up. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The email arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. Subject line invoice, outstanding balance. It was a PDF, professionally formatted, line items and all. Emotional distress, $500, lost wages from missed work, $320, Uber home from airport, $85, suitcase damage during removal from terminal, $200. Total due $1.05, payment deadline included, late fees listed. I stared at it for a long time, waiting for the punchline that never came. The suitcase damage was particularly rich. The suitcase was a gift I'd bought him. Now he was billing me for its scuff marks. I forwarded the invoice to a lawyer friend. His response came back in under 5 minutes. Not enforceable. At all. This is laughable. I screenshot that and sent it back to my ex without commentary. His reply was a string of crying emojis followed by, "I can't believe you're being this cold. We were supposed to get married someday." I didn't respond. The escalation had finally crossed from emotional to absurd. And absurdity has a way of killing any lingering guilt. I wasn't cruel. I was done. I thought the invoice would be the peak of the insanity. I really did. In my mind, nothing could possibly top the audacity of sending a professionally formatted bill for being broken up with. It felt like something out of a dark comedy, so over the top it bordered on parody. But the thing about people who are used to control is that they don't stop when the tactic fails. They escalate. A few days after the invoice went unanswered, I got a message from the same coworker who'd first warned me. Short, almost apologetic. Just a heads up. He's telling people at work that you cheated on him, and that's why you went on the trip alone. Most people aren't buying it. HR pulled him aside again. Of course he was. When you can't rewrite reality, you invent a new one. One where you're the victim and everyone else is cruel, unreasonable, heartless. One where consequences are someone else's fault. I didn't defend myself. I didn't post screenshots. I didn't correct the narrative. Anyone who mattered already knew the truth or would figure it out soon enough. Lies require maintenance. The truth just waits. Then came the email follow-up. Polite, almost businesslike. Just checking in regarding the outstanding balance. I really don't want to pursue legal options, but I will if I have to. I deleted it without replying. That should have been my cue that silence was working. Instead, it became his reason to try something bolder. The call from reception at my office came mid-morning the following week. "There's a man here asking for you," the receptionist said carefully. "He says he's your boyfriend. He seems upset. Should I send him up?" My chest tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "No, I'll come down. If I give you a signal, call security." When I reached the lobby, he was sitting in one of the waiting chairs, head in his hands. He looked smaller somehow, thinner. His usually polished appearance had slipped wrinkled shirt hair, pulled back messily, eyes red and unfocused. For half a second, instinct kicked in. The old urge to comfort, to smooth things over, to fix. Then I remembered the invoice. "Can we talk?" he asked when he saw me. "We can talk here," I said. 5 minutes. He glanced around at the security camera, the receptionist, a few employees pretending very hard not to watch. He hated having an audience. That alone told me everything I needed to know. "I made a mistake," he said quickly. "The thing with the other woman, it was nothing. I got caught up in attention. You're the one I love. You asked for a break the day before our trip so you could bring someone else on a vacation I paid for," I replied calmly. "I talked to your coworker. I know the plan." His face went pale. "Who told you that?" "Doesn't matter." He started crying then, loud, unrestrained. Heads turned. I stayed still. "You can't throw away 2.5 years," he said between sobs. "I'm not," I said. "You already did. I'm just acknowledging it. I'll do therapy, couples counseling, anything. What I want," I said, "is for you to leave and stop contacting me. You're being cruel. I'm being clear." For a moment, he just stood there waiting for me to break, to chase, to prove something one last time. I didn't. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard it made the receptionist jump. When he was gone, my coworker, who'd definitely been pretending to check her phone, looked up. "You okay?" I nodded. And for the first time, I meant it. I thought the scene at my office would be the end of it. Public, firm, undeniable. The kind of ending you can't pretend didn't happen. And for a while, it was quiet. Too quiet. A few days later, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something in me, curiosity, maybe answered. It was his father. He'd always been the quiet one, the reasonable one, the man who stayed out of the drama while his wife and son spun narratives around him. His voice was tired low, like someone who had been carrying other people's chaos for decades. "I'm not calling to ask you to take him back," he said gently. "I just wanted you to know. He's struggling." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, and I meant it. "But I can't be the one who fixes this anymore." There was a pause, then a sigh. "I understand," he said. "He's always been like this. The games, the testing. His mother does the same thing to me. I've tried to talk to him about it, but..." His voice trailed off. "I just wanted to say I appreciate how calm you've been through all of this." That call stayed with me longer than I expected. Not because it changed anything, but because it confirmed something I'd been slowly realizing. This wasn't a temporary flaw. This was a system, a family dynamic that fed on emotional chaos and mistook intensity for intimacy. After that, the threats stopped. No lawyers, no invoices, no dramatic emails, just silence. My lawyer friend wasn't surprised. "People who actually have legal ground don't warn you," he told me. "They just act. Threats are usually a bluff." He was right. The coworker sent one last update a week later. My ex had been telling people at work that I cheated on him and abandoned him at the airport as punishment for asking for space. Almost no one believed it. HR had spoken to him again. He was on thin ice. I closed the message and didn't respond. I didn't need updates anymore. Stop! Part 7, After the Noise. Life didn't dramatically improve overnight. There was no movie-style montage where everything suddenly made sense and happiness wrapped itself neatly around me. What came instead was quieter and far more real. I started therapy. Not couples counseling, just me. Sitting in a small room once a week, unraveling why I'd stayed as long as I did, why I mistook being calm for being wrong, why I kept chasing someone who only felt loved when I was uncomfortable. My therapist had a word for it: trauma bonding. I called it habit. Habits, it turns out, can be broken. I learned how easily I'd prioritize someone else's emotions over my own boundaries. How often I'd ignored my instincts because they didn't match the drama I'd been told love was supposed to look like. We worked on recognizing red flags earlier, on understanding that love doesn't require constant proof. That peace isn't boredom, it's safety. The vacation photos are still on my phone. Me on the beach, me by the pool, me eating an incredible steak dinner alone, smiling without checking my phone every 5 minutes. They're proof. Proof that I can be happy by myself. Proof that I don't need chaos to feel connected. Proof that walking away wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. Was it petty to cancel his ticket and change the reservation? Maybe. Do I regret it? Not for a second. He asked for space. I gave it to him. The fact that he didn't mean it isn't my responsibility. Some people play games. Some people call the bluff.